right, we got the thing going. We're okay. We're
Oh.
recording. Yep. All right. There's a theme song for the Lateral Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Lateral Show. Fasten your seatbelts, because here we go.
Welcome back into another edition of the Lateral Show, a sideways look at fantasy football and the best fantasy football podcast without any check marks. My name is Herms. You can follow me on Twitter at Herms NFL, and I am joined, as always, by McLateral. Hello.
Yeah, I don't think you'll see me getting a check mark anytime soon. It's a free app. I'm not paying $8 a month.
I think I'm only going to do it just because I like the whole, like, hey, you can read this article without a subscription because you have Twitter Blue. And then also the option I have to save myself from tweeting out typos. But yeah, I honestly could do without the check mark. That's not why I bought Twitter Blue.
I will say the thing I am loving is just all the people that are going to bite at the fake Adam Schefter or fake Ian Rappaport tweets. Like, I'm so excited for it. Like,
yeah. It's going to be a good time to watch that go down, and it's going to be a good time to watch Week 10 NFL action go down this weekend. And we will be breaking down our Week 10 Sunday storylines that we are looking forward to. Some pretty interesting things. I know I've got something fun to talk about. I'm sure you got something fun to talk about. So that is what we're doing for the episode today. If you do not already subscribe to the Fantasy Six Pack YouTube channel, go ahead. Find that button, the little rectangle one that says subscribe, click it. It'd be super cool if you did. Also, if you see a thumbs up button like this, kind of like this, click that as well. And also, if you want to get the all-access pass to everything available at Fantasy Six Pack, go to fantasysixpack.net/plans. You get the paywalled part of my waiver wire article on top of all of the DFS tools, access to the Discord community, and the award-winning rankings found on the site. So, fantasysixpack.net/plans. Now that I've paid the bills, I suppose we can get into being on our soapboxes. If we have anything to talk about, I'll let you go first if you have anything.
Sorry, all I heard about was like paying for plants or something. I don't know, man. Honestly, the Twitter thing, like kind of the thing. It's just like I think it is insane that people are going to pay $8 a month for this. I really do. And part of it is because A, now that everyone can pay for it, we're seeing what can happen when anyone can get a check mark. B, like ad money is just leaving Twitter in droves, making the value of the services you're paying for it to get behind paywalls. Like that's because of a deal that those news outlets have with Twitter, and like that could go away. You know,
Yeah.
So it'll be very curious to see how it all shakes out. To me, it's like you're paying to get on the Titanic when you already know it's hit the iceberg and is sinking.
It's definitely a little weird. I think our old pal Elon probably should have gone ahead and walked away from the Twitter deal when he had a chance, because I think he fucked around a little too quick, and now he is finding out just as fast. So,
well, and the best part is he knows he couldn't have gotten out of it, which is why he ultimately went through with it. Like he agreed to a contract. He like fully agreed to overpay for this thing, and he did overpay. Like he absolutely overpaid. Now he's scrambling to figure out how to, get it working, and I don't know that it will.
Well, the good news is comedy is now legal again on Twitter, so we have.
Except it's not.
If nothing, yeah. Oh my gosh.
Oh my god! Did you see they got Daniel Radcliffe?
No. Oh
yeah. They banned his account. Now I don't know if it was Weird Al perhaps making a joke about parody and whatnot, but the impression I got is that Daniel Radcliffe's account got suspended.
Great. There you go. Thanks, Elon. You took away Harry Potter. I mean, what do we do? Yeah, all right. Well, I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to go over that as this weird situation continues to unfold. And then just quickly on my soapbox, if you want to skip past maybe 30, 45 seconds, a minute, if you don't want to hear about politics, that's your choice as a viewer, as a listener, and just want to go ahead and forewarn you there. But, dude, shout out all these election deniers and all this bullshit just losing. Like,
Wow.
look, I'm not here to push any of my views or anything on anybody, but when it comes to shit like that, folks, lateral heads, six packers, that's just some fringe theory stuff that, like, I'm glad for the most part did not turn out to be super popular. Because, like, if you're out here just believing in some batshit crazy stuff like that, I mean, you really gotta get back in touch with reality. So that was definitely nice to see for sure. It made yesterday a little bit easier. And then also, great state of Maryland, the flag behind me. We get weed over the summer. Let's go. Heyo, shout out legalizing of weed in Maryland. Let's go.
Unfortunately, all we might get over here is Herschel Walker as a senator. So all I know is I hope that Benson Bennett, when he runs for Senate, will maybe have a little more experience in 40 years. I mean,
hey,
apparently, if all you got to do is play football at Georgia, like, it's got to be what's next.
sure. I mean, I think Todd Gurley would be fun. I could see
I'd
that
rather
being
have
more
Todd
enjoyable
Gurley than Herschel Walker.
Especially because, well, the worst thing about the Herschel Walker thing is now that it's going to a runoff, like, we already know what his 40 time is. Like, he's definitely going to win that foot race. Like, there's no way Warnock is faster than him.
Well, especially if he's got to run from his kids.
Hey-oh, pew, pew, pew. Look at it. Yeah, lateral show here with the jokes, baby. Let's go. Yeah, all right. So now that we've had our lateral political corner, we can pivot to talking about football, the thing you're actually here to have us talk about. So before we do that, look at this. 2 weeks in a row. I'm remembering. Before we get into it.
I said it on our first appearance on anything ever. I am here because no one will pay me to write about public policy, and I stand by that.
Look, fair enough.
I never told anyone that my goal was to write about football. I've in fact explicitly avoided saying that. So just be warned.
There you go. Say it. Look, peek behind the curtain for those of you who have not been listening to us for a long time. Yeah. So cool. Actually, yeah, dude, that would be kind of fun to write about. Whatever. Okay, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole.
Writing about tech's fun.
Yeah, also shout out writing about sports. I'm, comfortable with the job that I have. If my boss is, like, yeah, not saying that that's not fun. But before we get into this week's topics, we do have to go over things that we talked about in last week's show, which was the trade deadline review. So, I mean, I'm sure you've got some notes come up with for the fastest minute in fantasy football news. So go ahead, tell the listeners what is up with the recap.
All right. Well, last week was NFL trade deadline madness. So we had Kansas City getting Kadarious Toney to finally replace Tyreek Hill. Toney was quiet in his first week back, in Kansas City. Juju Smith-Schuster and Mecole Hardman were heavily involved, but in theory, there's room to grow for Toney. I mean, they got close to 10 targets each, and then Travis Kelce also had a huge workload. So, if Toney can take away a little bit, should be all good. One guy we don't have to worry about, TJ Hockenson, moving in division to Minnesota, looked really good for the Vikings. Finished tight end in PPR, 10-5 in PPR scoring, second on the Vikings in targets against the Commanders. Another NFC North thing, though, Chase Claypool, Chicago Bears wide receiver, one, it appears unlikely. He was involved, 6 targets, didn't produce much against the Dolphins, and it seems like Mooney is likely to remain the Bears wide receiver one at first glance. Both could ultimately be viable. It's still worth monitoring, but it seems like Mooney is still the main guy in Chicago. Bradley Chubb, meanwhile, going to the Dolphins in our Dolphins portion of the show. Dolphins DST actually finished DST 5 on the week last week, despite a high-scoring affair. Chubb wasn't really the reason why, but we're still going to claim that, it's an overall win. Yeah. Chase Edmonds' era in Miami is over. Broncos were on bye, though, so nothing to see here until after this week. However, Jeff Wilson Jr. took his place in Miami, and he looked good, like real good. Led the Dolphins in rushing attempts, rushing yards, and RB targets, good. So if you managed to get him, awesome. Calvin Ridley betting on Jacksonville, nothing to see there because of the betting, he's not allowed to play until next year.
We got a lot of time.
Nyheim Hines headed to Buffalo. He was pretty silent, like Toney. So again, this might be a case of just being new to the offense. I would monitor it. Seeing Hockenson do well, great, but not necessarily the norm when you're just making a transition. Again, Bradley Chubb, Chase Claypool, Nyheim Hines, Kadarious Toney, these guys were all pretty quiet in their first week, though. Again, Claypool at least got 6 targets. Zack Moss headed to Indy in exchange for Nyheim Hines. As expected, Deion Jackson was JT's backup. Moss could always factor in, especially since Deion Jackson had a worrying moment with his knee. And Jeff Saturday is now the coach for the Colts on Sundays. But expect the depth chart to be JT, Jackson, and then shrug emoji. Brandin Cooks not dealt. Cooks was out in week 9. TBD if his role changes, but seems unlikely. And Kareem Hunt stays put. Cleveland was on bye last week, so we don't expect Hunt's role to change much, but we don't really know at this point, and that is that.
There you go. The fastest minute in fantasy football podcasting.
Might have cracked a minute on that one, but it'll be okay.
It's all good. You still get the air horn anyway. Yeah! It's still a W in my book. So there you go. Before we get into the thing that I had planned to talk about for my Week 10 Sunday storyline, something you just said prompted me to think about something that I wrote over at Clutch Points over the weekend, and I'm going to do it on the spot because I actually just have a lot of thoughts about this. It's a bit of a callback to things that I've mentioned multiple times on this show this season, just the Colts and how weird it is, like how bad Matt Ryan was, but now the ship is continuing to sink further and further. And no offense to Sam Ehlinger, like I'm very happy to see a young man get his opportunity and do his thing. But that press conference, the introductory press conference.
Yeah, you know what? Let me get on my soapbox because this is actually what bothers. Fuck Jim Irsay. Fuck the Irsay family.
That too.
You took this shit from Ballmer, and now you're running it into the ground like this. I'm sorry. Jeff Saturday has been basically a peewee football coach for a couple of minutes, and now he's running an NFL locker room. Like, are you kidding me? Like, forget about the fact that you looked over 2 head coaches on that staff, including one with a Super Bowl ring. Like, John Fox is on that staff. You looked over qualified assistants. You avoided interviewing any minorities. And you just, again, you hired your buddy who happened to be in town for the week. He happened to be in town for the week. And now he's the head coach of an NFL football team. It is disgusting. It should not be allowed. And it wouldn't be allowed, actually, if they didn't put the interim tag on him. If he was an actual head coach, none of this would have been allowed. He would have had to go on through due process, Rooney Rule, et cetera, et cetera. Like, this is insane. It is baffling, and I almost hope Frank Reich sues for wrongful termination and tries to connect. Like Jim Irsay wanted to bring his buddy Jeff Saturday into the locker room, and that's why Reich got hired. Unfortunately, the Colts weren't that good, so I think Reich is just going to be moving on to the next one here, and who can blame him? So yeah, that's my soapbox. This is absolute insanity.
Yeah, and to kind of go off of that, so you've addressed the concerns of Jeff Saturday, but what really worried me was it was one passing comment that I found, but to quote myself from an article that I wrote about this, Jim Irsay euphemistically asked the question to a reporter, do you know how many shots Michael Jordan has missed? In defense of GM Chris Ballard. And mind you, this guy... so as far as I'm concerned, he's like Schrodinger's GM. Like, is he good? Is he bad? There are so many different. It's a weird way of ever figuring out the legitimate answer to that. But as far as him being like a Jordan-esque executive,
yeah, not so much.
He has not been able to find a long-term solution at quarterback since Andrew Luck up and left. And I know it was only 2019 that happened, but that's still enough time to do something there, Buster.
By the way, it feels like it has been 10 years since that happened.
Oh my God, yeah. Dude, it's crazy how time flies like that. And then since taking over as the Colts GM in 2017, the franchise has only made 3 first-round picks. So you think about, is he good at drafting some of these defensive players and finding value there? Sure. But, when your biggest deficiencies are your inability to replenish with high-shelf first-round capital and not finding a quarterback under the age of 60 that is well past their prime, I don't understand what they're doing. So, I worry about this even for the remainder of this season because, with Saturday coming in, I saw the offensive assistant that's being promoted to play calling has
never called a play before, by the way.
He has
no clue what he's doing.
And he's almost our age.
He's pretty new.
Weird.
I think he was a quality control guy.
Yeah, it's assistant QB.
I think he had just
that,
gotten promoted from quality control to something assistant level, and now he's going to be calling the plays, and it's just You're going to have two people who have never called plays calling the plays.
Yeah.
Like, this is insane.
Like,
the other thing I heard with the Ballard thing, though, is like the expectation was that Phillip Rivers was going to be there for years. I'm like, if that was your expectation, then that is an indictment on you as a GM. Because I don't think anyone thought Phillip Rivers was going to last for years.
Yeah. Like, and the only way the whole Michael Jordan analogy makes sense is if we're talking about Michael Jordan's tenure as an executive with the
Wizards.
Because in that case,
know.
I mean,
the Irsay family is quite familiar with the DMV. Maybe that's what they're referring to.
Exactly. So what would Chris Ballard's Kwame Brown then be? I think that's really the question. I don't, but but
I mean, sort of Carson Wentz.
I guess that's true. At any rate, as far as just like
round pick, can't really botch them, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's frustrating as hell, but. At least as far as the remainder of this year goes, I mean, like we had already talked about it being kind of like panic time for like Michael Pittman a little bit because it's just like, I mean, Allender's the quarterback, like whatever.
It's panic time for that entire offense. I want to play nobody from that offense except for maybe the running backs. And honestly, that's kind of a maybe. Like, and ultimately, you'll probably have to play Jonathan Taylor, though we'll kind of get into that a little later in this episode. It's going to be tough to find better flexes than Deion Jackson if Deion Jackson is playing in lieu of Taylor, but like, I wouldn't expect like world-breaking results from either of them.
All right. Well, and look, if you've got that teed up for later in the show, I will table my thought about that because that will be a fun conversation. But all in all, I just know two things. One, the Colts, why? And then two, if after this season Omar Khan in his, general manager's office, wherever it is in Pittsburgh, better be picking up that damn phone as soon as he hangs up firing Matt Canada and saying, hey, Frank, what you doing, buddy? Because, look, Frank Reich has a good track record of developing or at least aiding in the development of some pretty good young quarterbacks. Like, I don't know, man. I'd be really thrilled to see it. And whether he comes to Pittsburgh or not, that is going to be something when we talk about the coaching carousel and all those changes that come down, months from now and whenever that podcast inevitably drops, whoever gets Reich, look, we could say whatever we want about his head coaching record, which, again, mind you, after everything we just said about Chris Ballard, who knows how big of a fault that is, for him, But, like, even if he goes back down to OC ranks, that's immediately one of the best offensive minds in football going to help somebody out. Like, yeah.
I don't know if he'll make it to the off season though, so you might be needing to fire Matt Canada a little quicker.
Well, our off season starts as soon as week 18 is over, so we're gonna it'll be around the right time. We don't have to.
Moving on.
We get a head start on that. And we get a head start about looking at the playoffs. That's the big thing that I did want to talk about real quick. I kind of dabbled about it behind the paywall, the waiver article this week, but just to kind of, reiterate a couple things. I am of the mindset that at least when it comes to quarterback and defense and special teams, if you've been streaming that all year, like if you're not somebody that has Lamar Jackson and the Eagles defense, for example, as your QB and DST combo, and you're just like really piecing it together, have two of each on your team. I really believe in that strategy because even though from like a kind of like a, I don't know, basic game theory standpoint or like from an analytical standpoint of just like, well, you're minimizing your upside, blah, blah, blah. You're also like minimizing the risk of hemorrhaging points if like your onesie position guys that you've been streaming the whole time have been kind of meh. So I pulled up a couple defenses that I would definitely suggest to people with good schedules, but then I also just want to point out, kind of like I said about the QB thing, like if you're going to stream between two guys and play the matchups, make sure at least one of them is somebody with mobility. Now, I haven't checked the numbers since waivers ran, but I'm talking Marcus Mariota, a Daniel Jones, a something like that, because even if they implode, they're going to run enough to the point where it's not going to necessarily sink your ship in the playoffs. That's kind of my thing. But before I bring up the defenses or whatever, like, what do you think about that strategy for redraft managers if, you're making it to this point?
I definitely like going with mobility at quarterback. I think I have some question marks, particularly about Mariota. So like Daniel Jones had like a little bit of an injury issue, but he seems to have gotten past that pretty quickly. But Mariota, like he's throwing like 12 times a game. Like it's bad. So like I have concerns that his rushing floor almost isn't good enough. But I definitely get the logic, and I definitely get the logic of having multiple quarterbacks as you make a playoff push, so that way you're not completely like submarined by an injury.
Yeah, because like between that and then also like my big argument, other than the whole minimizing risk of hemorrhaging points if something goes awry, you don't have to worry about that stuff if you proactively add those onesie position guys now, because you can narrow your focus on the two positions that really matter the most in redraft for the most part, being running back and wide receiver. Like, I think, and like, yes, you're taking away, two bench spots. So that's another part of the argument against this. But my thing is, well, you've made it this far. You probably have a pretty good team. It's not like you're going to be taking shots on maybe this guy pops off once we get into double digit weeks, because for the most part, guys that are going to pop off without injury, to open up a spot ahead of them, have already done so. So taking these shots on guys in week 3 that it's like, oh, maybe he'll get more involved. It's like, well, I think we know if somebody's going to get a little more involved by now. So like that would definitely be my other part of it too, is like, you don't like the purpose of your bench is different once you hit the playoffs. It's not like it is early in the season.
Yep, I definitely get where you're coming from there. Yeah, with the Mariota thing again, like my one concern is like last week he had 12 completions. Week 7 he had 8. Week 4 he had 7. It's just like normally like your rushing floor should be such an asset, and with him his passing ceiling is just such a liability that it's like almost too difficult to like advocate for taking him. But I have at one point this season. I mean, after 3 weeks he looked interesting.
Yeah.
But if they're really going to have, I mean, he had back-to-back weeks with 13 and a half passing attempts on average in those 2 weeks. I mean, that's bad. That's like unheard of bad.
It's not great, Bob.
But to your point, one of those weeks where he had 14 passing attempts, he finished as the QB5. And, he rushed for 50 yards. He rushed for a touchdown. That's a big part of it.
Yeah. And if you're looking for an option that maybe doesn't have the legs, another name that I came across when, looking this stuff up, and I know this is going to make you very happy, handsome Jimmy GQ, Jimmy Garoppolo himself, because honestly, look, I got it pulled up here, week 14 through 17, Tampa, Seattle, the Commanders, and the lowly Raiders, who also just straight up released Jonathan Abram, which I don't understand. He's a good safety, but that's a whole other thing. It's boring. But guys like that, pretty safe options. Look at that offense that he's in. Look at who he's given the ball to. Like, I'm just Jimmy Garoppolo's not a bad playoff option if you're thinking about it.
So I guess the one thing I'll say on that front is I'm typically not pro Jimmy Garoppolo in fantasy. Love the man as an NFL quarterback. However, since week 5, so prior to week 5, he had 0 games with 30 passing attempts.
Mm-hmm.
He had none in week 1 because Trey Lance was the starter. He had 21 in week 2. He had 29 in week 3 and 27 in week 4. Since then, he's had 30, 41, 37, and admittedly 25 against the Rams, but in that game only had 4 incompletions. So pretty good.
Yeah.
And since week 5, his weekly finishes have been QB9, 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 and QB14. So there is kind of something there. And he has a lot of offensive weapons. And from that week 5 to week 8 period, he was the QB8 overall, averaging 18 points per game. My main concern with him is that ultimately that QB14 finish is going to be more the norm than the QB9 finish. And QB9 might be around where his ceiling is just because he doesn't run the ball at all. But if you're looking for safety, I almost weirdly prefer him to Marcus Mariota, even though Mariota over that same period was actually the QB5, had more points. But it's just like Mariota is such a low volume passer that like I'm hesitant to pin my hopes to such an anemic offense. I'd almost rather take the Niners like more high octane offense with multiple offensive weapons.
Yeah. So there you go. Just like it's the patented Herms strategy that I've shared on this show all the time. I take the under oath approach. Sometimes you're only out there to chase safety, and when it comes to the playoffs, it's pretty important to do that. And then just
for what it's worth, in my opinion, the real move is to somehow trade for Trevor Lawrence, but that's a whole separate argument.
Actually, look, I mean,
you might even be able to pick him up in some leagues, but like Trevor Lawrence, week 6 QB4, week 7 QB7, week 9 QB12, and I think these sophomore QBs are starting to come into their own a bit. Like, week 17 playoffs at Houston.
Yeah, it's like from 14 through 17. That whole stretch there: Tennessee, Dallas, the Jets, and Houston. Like.
Gets Detroit week 13.
Yeah. And it's not like a cakewalk per se, but it's also not difficult. You know what I mean? Like, it's not absurdly difficult to the point where, you're going to be kicking yourself if something goes wrong there.
Yeah, it's not quite as nice as week 16 Washington, week 17 Las Vegas for Jimmy Garoppolo. But yeah, these are the type of guys you would definitely want to have like in your bench depth.
Yeah. And then to shout out a couple DSTs, because I do really firmly believe in pairing DSTs and trying to play the matchups. The Kansas City Chiefs get the Denver Broncos twice.
Yes, they do.
So week 14 through 17, it is Denver, Houston, Seattle, and Denver. So look, folks. I think they're going to have a pretty fun time with that. And then for as banged up as this Chargers defense is, they do end the year with Miami week 14, which you don't love. But then 15, 16, and 17 is Tennessee, the Colts, and the lowly Rams that they share that stadium with. So, and look, there's a decent chance, maybe the Titans fall out of it and, put Tannehill on ice and we keep seeing Malik Willis or something. Like, there's a decent chance it could be a really good matchup back-to-back weeks for them. If nothing, at minimum, you are getting the Chiefs preying on Sam Ehlinger as part of the fantasy playoffs. So,
no, I definitely agree with that call. As you know, in our dynasty league,
Chargers,
I picked up the Chiefs because I'm just like, okay, that's a solid schedule. The other one I want to point out, if you see me looking down, I promise it's because I'm looking at some notes here. So not an amazing one, but this week the Titans get Denver. They get Jacksonville in week 14. And while Trevor Lawrence has been doing a bit better, he has been throwing away some picks. So it's still a viable opponent. And they get Houston in week 16. So that's something to kind of maybe keep an eye on. But the real one, which I managed to pick up in one league, the New York Giants, who just came off a bye. So there's a chance that because waivers run, you missed out on it. But if they're out there, I am intrigued by them. They get Houston, Detroit, Dallas, Washington, Eagles, Washington, Minnesota, and week 17, Indy. That is a pretty good run of games. If you could pair them up with someone else, I think you'd be pretty set for the fantasy playoff run.
I mean, look. There you go. Dude, I'm really glad that we talk about stuff like this because I never hear stuff like this too much on other fantasy podcasts.
Well, people can't handle playing with the DST.
Yeah, it's
batting kickers.
Yeah, and we do our best. We do our best to serve as many people as possible. That's what it's all about here at the Lateral Show.
Speaking of kickers, Nick Folk is going to go on bye this week, and most people can't afford to roster 2 kickers. I know I'm in that boat. You should be looking to Nick Folk. Just pick him up if you have some ability to do so this week. And if not, make him a top waiver claim. He will be good the rest of the season. This guy already has 3 finishes as the number 1 kicker in fantasy. You want some Nick Folk.
And if not Nick Folk, I mean, look, folks, for some reason he's available just constantly whenever I, check places and stuff, because I had to drop him for his bye week, but immediately scooped up again Cade York of the Cleveland Browns. I got
him in a lot of places this week.
Yeah, dude. Like his availability in like Yahoo and Sleeper or whatever, or Yahoo and ESPN, it's just like he's out there in so many leagues. Like, bro, I think he's like the kicker 11 on the year, dude. Like, so I mean, come on,
And he's
people.
honestly even doing a little bit better in terms of points per game.
Exactly, dude. Shout out that young man.
Kicker 10 in terms of points per game. The one of the guys he's behind is Matthew Wright, who was in relief for Harrison Butker for 2 weeks. So really kind of kicker 9.
Not too bad. Not too bad. Well, there you go. So you got some bonus kicker content here from the Lateral Show.
What we did.
So what have you got planned?
Yeah, so I think we sort of thought of this show as like kind of examining like what storyline we're thinking of going into a certain week. And so with Odell Beckham coming back, I really started to think about injuries. And originally I had this as we need to rethink about how we evaluate injuries. And then I was like, that sort of implies that I have a solution here for you that will totally change how you think about injuries. And I just don't have that. I'm going to be honest, because it's a very difficult thing. And I think that's why we need to think about how we evaluate injuries, because it's very difficult for people to do, even the best, even the ones who are doctors. Like, there's constantly changing things, improvements in medicine, improvements in treatment. These guys are in better shape than athletes have ever been. But so I just wanted to go through like a couple common serious injuries that come up. So I didn't really deal a lot with shoulder, anything like that, collarbone, etc. So the ones that I have here are ACL, ankle, foot, Achilles, and turf toe. And I actually added turf toe then because of Treylon Burks coming back. So I thought that merited a quick conversation. Concussions, another one that I didn't throw in here just because concussions are concussions. If you get them, assume they're going to be out for a week, and then you kind of monitor from there. But yeah, so I wanted to start with the Achilles. So the Achilles is typically a 6 to 12 month recovery time. And if we look at some recent ones, Cam Akers took 6 months. Hasn't really been the same since. James Robinson took 8 months. And while he seems largely the same, if you actually look, his yards after contact and his broken tackles have actually taken a step back. So it does look like he's lost a little bit of explosiveness. So it's just like, if I've got someone, I think, on the closer side to 6 to 8 months in that recovery window, I don't know that I'm going to trust them the same as if I've got someone that's in that 8 to 12 month range on the recovery window. Because it seems like it really just takes some time. Because, I mean, we look at Donta Foreman. Donta Foreman looks as good as he ever has been. But granted, it's been a couple of years since his Achilles injury.
I think like 3.
Yeah.
Almost. Yeah. Like,
though admittedly, last year also looked good. Even though he didn't get like a full run out. He did look good last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you have anything to add on that front. If not, I will move on to ACL.
Just a quick shout out to Deontay Foreman, because I mean, even coming into the NFL, like when he was playing at Texas, like I'm pretty sure he had like a few records while he was there.
Yeah,
like
he looks good.
Under the radar dude, but like he's been a guy the whole like that's why I think like I was a little pessimistic about how good he'd be at first, but then like I thought back to like who he was coming into the NFL, and I was like, oh yeah, we all really liked him. We thought he was going to get the opportunity. So just fun memory lane moment with me on Deontay Foreman. So there you go.
But yeah, and again, not that yards per attempt is everything. We know it isn't. But like since coming back from that Achilles tear, so he misses pretty much all of 2018, misses all of 2019. 2020, he comes back for Tennessee. 4.3 yards per carry, 4.3 yards per carry for Tennessee. The following year, 4.9 yards per carry for Carolina so far this season. That's actually better than the 4.2 yards per carry he was getting in Houston before he tore the Achilles.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I'm not leaping to the conclusion that Donta Foreman tearing his Achilles made him a better running back, because that would be absurd. But there is something that shows here, like he took like almost 2 years off from football. And he hasn't lost a step. So I think it's just something to think about. Like, yes, it was really cool to see Cam Akers come back so quickly. I don't think it's actually been good for his football career.
No, it hasn't. And it hasn't been good for that Rams offense. Like, honestly, dude, and we talked about it plenty, you know, like outside of Cooper Kupp, man, like I don't really care for anybody on this team. And frankly, if Kyron Williams doesn't work out, and he doesn't hit and like turn the run game into something valuable, I'm done. I'm not going to try. I'm not going to try anymore. I explicitly put, so like, just, to preview what the paywall portion of my waiver article is like, like I list like 5 or 6 of like the top priority guys. And then I just go position, in with like a little bulleted list, so specifically in the running back list that I put for this week's, nobody from the Los Angeles Rams. Because it's like cool if you already stashed Kyron, then like whatever, you already do it. But like I've seen Hendo get dropped. I've seen like some people maybe still get like weirdly invested in like Ronnie Rivers. Shout out Fresno State. But like it's just, bro.
I'm not biting on the Ronnie Rivers thing. I think Darrell Henderson was less healthy than we were led to believe last week, and I think that's why Rivers got the run out.
Yeah. So it's like, dude, just God. I hope Cam Akers figures something out and like gets back to a former version of himself. Because even though I was always skeptical about how high people were on him in fantasy, as far as real life goes, like he was a really fun player that I liked watching a lot. Like it is a shame. It is a shame.
He's noticeably worse than he was. Like whether you thought he'd ultimately succeed or not, like he's noticeably worse.
It's dude. It's crazy. It makes me so sad. It makes me so sad.
All right, moving on to ACL. So ACL typically takes 8 to 12 months, generally 9 months. So we got a couple different versions of this to deal with this season. So Odell Beckham Jr. actually at the 9-month mark. So I really thought going into this season, we wouldn't get Odell Beckham until the beginning of the playoffs. And we're admittedly closer to that than you'd think. Like that's going to be the beginning of January. We're almost in the middle of November. Does not seem like a team is going to sign him this week. Then it might take him a week to get going. So we really could be looking at around Thanksgiving. So only a month before the playoffs start. So not crazy. But he bounced back a little quicker than I expected. Especially when you compare him to guys like Jameson Williams, who's currently on month 11 of his rehab, and it's expected to take 12. We talked about the possibility that he'll just get iced for his entire rookie season, which I think is still not impossible, though. After that division win against the Packers, maybe tanking isn't in the Lions' future. Who knows? But then you got guys like Chris Godwin. Just took him 8 months, and he looks like he hasn't missed a step. Like whatever his issues are besides, I don't think the ACL tear really has anything to do with it. Like, it hasn't seemed to, like, that offense is a mess, but he's seemed fine. He's been like Tom Brady's leading target at times, so, but then you look at J.K. Dobbins, like J.K. Dobbins took 12 months to recover basically, and he's now back on IR already. He's like re-aggravated. So I think this is one that we'll have to be like really monitoring, because J.K. looked a little off actually in some videos leading in to the start of the season. So the guys we got to keep an eye on for next year so far are Javonte Williams and Breece Hall. I think Javonte Williams, with this timeline we're looking at, should be good to go. I feel very good about that one. We'll obviously have to see how his training camp goes, etc. But provided he has a decent recovery, he's going to be right in the nice part of that window. I think Breece Hall might be a little more complicated. I think depending on your league, so like we're in a keeper league for our home league. I'm probably going to keep him just because I think when he gets back, it will be worth it to have him on the team. I think he will immediately go back to being that team's leading running back and one of the better running backs in the league. But he might miss the first couple of weeks, especially because I don't think this Jets team is going to be rushing him back. So that is one that I think I will be monitoring the most, because of the two, I think he's the most likely to miss some time to begin next season.
Yeah, and like the other complicating part about his situation too is, if I remember correctly, Elijah Vera Tucker also had a season-ending injury, like the really talented, offensive lineman, blocking in front of him. Like I had talked plenty about how much I thought of the Jets offensive line that they managed to string together in the offseason. And for a while there, it was starting to really work out. But, so when you couple like that with the fact that worrying about the running back themselves, then all I know is they need him bad. They really need him bad, dude. Because
well, hopefully they get him and Mekhi Becton, because Mekhi Becton's someone who's also been dealing with some injury issues on that O-line.
Imagine,
I think he's played a total of 48 snaps since his rookie season ended.
yeah, it's not great. Imagine how good this team was with better injury luck, and had they done the smart thing and drafted Justin Fields.
Yeah.
Oh,
That team with Justin Fields would be something to watch for sure. Okay, well, let's move on then to the ankle. Actually, just curious, Odell Beckham Jr., do you think he is someone that people need to be looking to adding on to their rosters? I'm sure a lot of people did on waivers this week. I definitely saw some movement. What are your expectations?
I mean, I included him in the waiver portion, the free part, because it was just one of those things that I was like, look, man, like, it's an odd circumstance, but it benefits him in so many ways. Like, above all, the number one being, like, he can go wherever he wants. It's not like this is one of those things where, there's like an off-season bidding war and it's going to come down to money or whatever, because he's only playing like part of the season anyway. He's going to sign a long-term deal somewhere
plenty
else.
Of money. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, we don't know exactly where he's going.
Well, we know he won't be going to the Browns.
Yeah.
That's about it.
That's true. Like, we know that he will go somewhere good.
He'll go somewhere to contend for sure.
Yeah. So like, he'll immediately walk into a good offense just because what motivation does he have to go anywhere besides a good offense? And like, I think the number that I put, and if I'm wrong, the correct number is in the article on the website, so whatever. But I think it's from like week 10 through 17 last year when he was on the Rams after, his falling out with the Browns. It was a wide receiver 27 overall in PPR during that time. So it's just like, yes, he's coming back from an ACL, and like, yes, wide receiver 27 isn't like world beating or anything, but like, if that's kind of like around the minimum that we're talking, like a wide receiver 3 or something, like a solid, talented wide receiver 3 for free out on the waiver wire is not something that's gifted to you at this time of year always. So like, yeah, dude, like it's OBJ, man. It's OBJ. He's good.
Yeah, there were definitely a couple bad weeks on the Rams last season, but he did finish wide receiver 9 in PPR in week 12 against the Packers, wide receiver 11 week 14 against the Cardinals, wide receiver 30 week 16, wide receiver 21 week 17. So there's definitely still flashes. There's definitely still something in the tank. He's 30 years old, which is interesting. I don't think that it's going to be quite so... I don't think it's going to quite matter so much this year, but I think it will make me hesitant on him going into next year. Even when he does sign that long-term deal, because I don't know how long-term that deal should be. But yeah, I tend to agree. I think it depends who you have to give up to get him, but he's definitely someone I think that could have impact as the season comes to a close.
Yeah, bro. Like, look, and he was good enough last year that he made me shut up, because I was one of those people that was just like, it's not the Browns holding him back. He's just not as good anymore. Blah, 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 blah. Then he just like immediately went to the Rams and was super good. And I was like, all right, Odell. Yep, I'm wrong.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think he has taken a bit of a step back, but the Browns were a real problem for him for sure.
Yeah. That was definitely an L, So yeah. I'm sure I've tweeted it before too. So fantasy receipts, do your thing, I guess.
Well, hopefully it wasn't an ankle, because that's the next injury we're talking about. So ankle's a tricky one. I think it's coming up more and more. I definitely feel like I had not known the term high ankle sprain to the degree which I do now when I first started playing fantasy football. So high ankle sprains are 4 to 6 weeks of recovery. Broken ankle is 6 to 8 weeks of recovery. And then a severe high ankle sprain can take up to 6 months of recovery time. So like, this is an injury you don't want to mess around with. And unfortunately, we have a lot of guys right now where you have to mess around with it. Now, one of the weird ones who I included in here, because he seems fine. Mm-hmm. Daniel Jones, ankle injury in week 4, I think got tagged with a high ankle sprain. He literally hasn't missed any time. He rushed for 107 yards in week 7. So I just thought that was like interesting to mention, because I think it's sort of a red herring. I don't know, misdiagnosis maybe or what, but like, he seems to have been fine. Meanwhile, we got some guys who are decidedly not so fine. So Jonathan Taylor, who we talked about earlier, ankle sprain, but a high ankle sprain was apparently ruled out, but still he's missed 2 games since week 5. He's maybe a touch less explosive. So he had 9 broken tackles prior to getting the ankle sprain. He's had just 1 since. And while that's not like a surefire mark of explosivity, it is a small sample size. To me, that does indicate something. Like, he was getting at least a broken tackle a game. He actually had a game where he had 0 broken tackles. Now, again, this happens to anyone. I'm not saying, like, break glass in case of emergency, smash that panic button. But I think there's an argument to be made that he is definitely still dealing with this nagging injury, as we saw with the fact that he didn't play last week. So I don't know. Like, if he plays this week, I'm not expecting a clean bill of health, especially because, like, I'm treating this as a re-aggravation.
Yeah.
So if it's a re-aggravation, it's not a high ankle sprain. Like, he's maybe got a couple more weeks before he's fully healthy. And if they throw him back in there, it could prolong that time. And we'll get back to him a little more because I know you wanted to say some things on him. Other guys to pay attention to: Mike Williams, Los Angeles Chargers wide receiver, high ankle sprain in week 7, expected to miss 4 weeks. It was 3 weeks ago. As we said, high ankle sprains 4 to 6 weeks. So that would be on the quicker side of the recovery time. So I'd be a little hesitant on him, throwing him right in there the first week if he does come back that quickly. If he comes back in like 5 weeks, then it might be like, okay, it's Mike Williams. They're going to target him. They gave it like an extra week of caution. But if he really does come back in 4 weeks, I think I'm going to be a little bit hesitant. David Njoku's another one that is just like, he had a high ankle sprain in week 7 as well. He keeps saying that he can like play any week, and I just don't believe it. I much more believe the team where it was like it's going to be 2 to 5 weeks out, though I don't quite believe that 2 number. I am not playing David Njoku his first week back until it hits that 5-week mark.
Yeah.
I'm just not.
And like, even though listeners are not going to hear this on the day that we're recording it or whatever, like, he didn't practice Wednesday. I assume by the time you hear this, he hasn't practiced again. So, I mean, at least early, showings on like his availability are trending in the right direction as far as managing his health, So that, dude, I need him so bad in a couple leagues.
There's no guarantee that those with Harrison Bryant will get any relief, as he got literally no work.
None.
With David Njoku out.
None.
Truly baffling, to be honest.
Because he won the award,
the
Mackey Award.
He was a touted tight end. They've used him annoyingly when they've had Njoku and Hooper.
Yeah.
And like they're just now just like, nah, we're good.
Yeah. I think kind of the reason that popped in my mind was just like, well, you mentioned his name, but then just I remembered just very quickly about how many people, like, the number is smaller, but there's still people out there like this that are just like huge Harrison Bryant truthers. I said his name right. Yeah. Harrison Bryant truthers. And like, I hope he gets a chance to maybe do something somewhere else. Like, I do understand that mentality, but like, I'm not even mentioning this to clown anybody. It's just that, like, whenever he gets the opportunity and then just like falls short, like, just seeing how sad that makes that little cohort, just like, it hurts me. I'm like, poor Harrison Bryant. Like, why can't he just do something? Like,
he's been healthy. The week before he got 2 targets. The week before he got 4 targets. He got 6 targets in week 4. And then he's got the time to shine. He literally doesn't get a single target. It's kind of like the AJ Dillon thing where it's just like, it's not like the guy's doing nothing when you throw the ball to him or when you hand the ball. Like, just give him some work. It's okay.
Dude, man.
Anyway, Jonathan Taylor, your thoughts. Go.
I believe I talked about it on this show. I think it was this show, but it might have been whatever. Not the point. I'm not going to be stunned if they put JT on ice. Like, let's just like,
I'll take it a step further. They should put JT on ice.
Well, yeah, they should, but as a matter of will they, won't, we don't know. But like, everything we talked about earlier in the show.
Luckily, we have experienced football mind just Saturday on the case.
Yeah, because it's like, I think I saw like a joking tweet or whatever about how like Irsay only like hired Jeff Saturday because it was like he's been quoted as saying, it's just like, I've touched Peyton Manning's butt more than whatever, just from or have had
Don't
Peyton
think that's a
Manning
qualification for head
Yeah.
coaching.
or yeah. So, but hey, it's just like that guy. But like with everything we talked about earlier and that, it's just there's no real reason to put him at risk. Like I understand that like it'll be the
Sorry, I was looking through Twitter for something, and with the whole Twitter verification thing, you know how there's like the fake accounts? So someone created a fake OJ Simpson account with a Twitter verification. It just says, "Yeah, not gonna lie, I did that shit." And it's like right at the top of my timeline. So I'm sorry.
No,
I couldn't hold that one in.
You're good, dude. Oh man, there have been some good ones. That's definitely up there. But like, oh shit, where was I? Right. Yeah, like what motivation do they really have, dude? Like, they're not gonna win. Like, he's only okay, yeah, that's where I was. Last year is his last year on his rookie deal,
Yep.
like so, it's not like you're protecting a long-term investment per se, but if you think you can be good next year and you choose not to extend him for whatever reason, because that's not really a conversation worth having like now, but like that's still one more year of cheap production that you can get out of him. So like, that's why when you mentioned Deion Jackson in that kind of like under the radar thing we did like 2 episodes ago, it was like,
yeah, it's been a couple.
yeah, like, dude, like, and like maybe Zack Moss has something to do with it. Probably not. I'm floating this out there merely for like dynasty heads that, maybe he's still out there, post trade. But as far as redraft people, like, yeah, don't fucking worry about that. But like, yeah, Deion Jackson, like, I really do believe that it's going to be him the rest of the way. There's
very
no
well
point.
could be. All right. So foot. Specifically also the Liz Frank injury.
Yes.
So foot, 2 to 4 weeks for a moderate foot soft tissue injury, 6 to 8 weeks for injuries needing a cast or splint. And Liz Frank can take up to 3 to 4 months. Now, if you fully recover from a Liz Frank, you can be good to go. Travis Etienne missed all of 2021 with a Liz Frank. He's looked great in 2022. No issues. Rashad Bateman, we have seen when you have a foot injury and you don't like actually let it heal, it goes from being a nagging thing where he misses 2 games to he's now got a Liz Frank and he's out for the season. Which brings me to Hollywood Brown. Now, I had Hollywood Brown on a roster. I have him on a couple rosters, actually. And in one, I'm holding him because I've got a very deep bench. And in one, I'm holding him because I've got an IR spot. But I have to say, after like looking into this, I am not confident he's going to play again this season. Now, they said it would take about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I just told you 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge difference in there.
Like, and again, like neither of us are doctors, but
Correct.
like my understanding of
the advice here is not to drop Hollywood Brown if you have him. At this point, if you've still held on to him, you should continue holding on until it is literally like your playoff life on the line. And that's the only viable move you have.
Yeah. But like I bring it up just because like, and again, like just preface it, neither of us are doctors. So like if I'm wrong,
I don't even play one on TV.
There you go. There we go. See, which reminds me, we should definitely find a way to get Matt LeBlanc on the show because it would be fun to talk to a guy who played a doctor on TV.
Maybe for next season, we do an injury roundup and we have Matt LeBlanc as Dr. Draco Moray.
Oh, my Lord. Okay. All right. Look, there we go.
That's why they pay us the big bucks.
Exactly. Putting it out there into existence. So yeah, again, if I'm wrong about this, like whatever, like any medical people, like in the comments on the video or whatever, like at me on Twitter, like fine. Like honestly,
we'd actually love it because we'd love to know more about this subject.
Like genuinely, if I'm wrong, like this is a great teaching opportunity, but like you can come back fast from it. But the reason the recovery time is longer is because like it's recommended you don't come back sooner rather than later because the re-injury rate
is high.
Incredibly high.
Sure.
So like I get why Hollywood could come back ASAP Fergie, but like there's no point in him doing that because what do they have to gain? Like, let's be like, look, the entire NFC South that's not the Niners are trending in a downward direction. Although, well, the Seahawks are kind of, coasting.
Yeah.
But
I'm actually, as a Niners fan, I am more worried about the Seahawks than clearly anyone else.
Yeah. So it's like your season's not really going anywhere. It's another lost year of Cliff Kingsbury just doing boneheaded shit because he can't evolve his offense. And, well, coupled with some injury stuff or whatever, I'm not going to put it squarely on him. That would be unfair. But, like, fuck it. Like, I'm pretty sure they signed him to an extension, too. It's like, this is a long-term thing, bro. Like, what?
Well, not only that, but we saw with Rashad Bateman, which was only a couple weeks later. Just done.
Yeah.
Immediately. Like, as soon as they knew it was a Liz Frank, his season was over.
Because it took him so long after that initial foot surgery to come and make his debut in, like, last year.
Yeah.
Like, so, yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely.
Last year might have been groin. Can't remember, though.
I think it was a foot thing.
It
might have been a groin thing.
Oh, well, he might have had groin in season and then, like, foot beforehand. So, feel free to hit us in the comments.
Yeah, in the comments. Again, if we're wrong about things, please.
But like for me, the just immediacy of like Liz Frank, Bateman, done. Liz Frank, ETN, done. Liz Frank, Hollywood Brown. Yeah, maybe he'll come back in a couple weeks. It's something just doesn't add up there.
It's weird. And then
speaking. Go ahead. If you still got something Liz Frank related, let's do that now. Before we get into the last topic. Because
I found like we're all spooked by this injury when it comes to like draft season and stuff, but the players that we've been spooked about that are like super far away from when the injury occurred have largely been fine. Yeah. But the guys that are like on the shorter end of the timeline, like that's when you get dicey. So just like as a reminder to people, that's why you missed out on Deebo Samuel last year. That's why you missed out on Travis Etienne this year. That's why people missed out on, I think, like Chris Carson in the past. It's just like,
yeah. So I will say, if Hollywood Brown gets to appropriately rehab his injury, I will have no concerns going into next year.
Yeah, like it matters when you got hurt and how far along you are in that process. Because even though we were talking about, like, yes, the re-injury rate is high. Anecdotal evidence that I have off the top of the dome suggests if the man is far enough removed and he's a talented enough player, go ahead, draft him. It's gonna be a good time. That's why I have so much ETN, because I was just like, I'm not gonna have the Deebo rug pulled out from under me again. Or like I'm learning. Well,
and not only that, but it was like I wasn't worried about the Liz Frank with ETN, and then I was worried about the Achilles with Robinson. So it just seemed like a nice little twofer there. Yeah. All right, last one wasn't originally in the plans, but Treylon Burks just came off IR.
Yes. Okay.
Had a turf toe injury. So here's the breakdown on turf toe. You got grade 1, may heal partially or even fully within a week. You got the grade 2, which can take as much as 2 weeks to resolve. And then you got the grade 3, which you'd think, based on everything I've just said, would take 3 weeks to resolve. But no. It's 2 to 6 months, motherfuckers. It's a long time. That's why Burks went on IR. But here's the thing. If we assume he had a grade 3 injury because he already spent so long on IR, it doesn't feel like it can be fully healed yet.
Remember Antonio Gibson?
Yeah. Remember Phillip Lindsay that one year?
Because it was the game against, well, I don't remember the Lindsay one as much, but I do remember it happened. But like the
last
Gibson
Denver
one,
year, or the second to last Denver year, I think.
Yeah.
He had a couple weeks where it was like a real problem.
Yeah. But like the Gibson one, I remember specifically just because it happened during a Steelers game. So, I mean, obviously I'm watching, I watch all the games. Shout out NFL Red Zone, I watch. But, but just in terms, whatever. Against my favorite team, I saw how far that toe bent, and it's like, oh, like I've had that happen to me before, just like working manual labor jobs. Like, yeah, like that shit's serious. And it just like, it was never good after that. It was bad. It was just very bad. Like, because like people like hear turf toe and they're just like, oh, it sounds like athlete's foot or something. It's just like, oh, like itchy or some shit. It's like, no, if I'm remembering what the injury is correctly, like it's like hyperextending the fuck out of your toes, or at least like most notably like the big toe. Like that shit hurts, bro. Like that shit hurts.
Yeah.
Real
so
bad.
Lindsay was September of 2020.
Okay, so yeah. Like, man.
It
Like,
took him a couple weeks.
Yeah. Like, because people out there, like, if you haven't experienced that injury, bro, because, like, I'm sure, like, in your soccer and or rugby time, you probably did it at least once, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
not good. Not good,
Yeah.
dude.
My bigger thing was one time I had a LCL sprain in my knee. I think that's
Oh,
what it was.
Lord.
So that one was fun.
That's the
I
inside
don't
one,
think,
right?
I don't think I ever let that one properly heal either. So,
Very
always
good.
a lovely time. So yeah, so I would just say, like, with Treylon Burks, if you want to stash him, that's fine. You know what your bench is like. I wouldn't play him this week.
Neither would I.
There's a real chance it doesn't end well. Don't put your fantasy hopes on that chance.
The best thing that has come out of the Treylon Burks injury and also just, like, weird functionality of the Titans offense, like, his dynasty value is really good right now.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. Now, I think the savvy dynasty players out there are already aware of this stuff. So it's like, if you're in a super sharp league, like, you're not going to pull a fast one on anybody. Like, so, like, don't hear what I'm like. I'm not assuming that everybody, because I know not a lot of people are going to think like that. But, like, the thing that really makes me feel good about his future, like, while I was on shift at, Clutch Points doing the whole, like, newsworthy thing, like, there was a thing that came across the the news board that we work off of. It was a quote from Mike Vrabel talking about
Was it the real Mike Vrabel?
So this was pre the last couple days. So this was definitely a real quote, but it was like, yeah, like, after the Chiefs game, like, whatever, and just something to the effect of, like, talking about Malik Willis and, like, the lack of throwing or, like, the poor throwing or whatever the fuck. And he was like, who is he even going to throw the ball to? Like, I'm kind of, like, paraphrasing.
Which I'm sure Nick Westbrook-Akine must have loved.
Yeah, so, like, and I'm paraphrasing it a little bit, but, like, it was basically that.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this man knows the receivers are not good. So, like, whatever incentive they had after spending a first round pick to, integrate Burks, which is already very high, is, like, now even greater, because he's looking at, like, the coach is looking at it and being like, oh boy, I don't know, man. So if there's a window, dude, like we agree, rest of this season, I'm probably not really thinking that much about it, but, like, long term, bro, man, because, like, even, like, rookie drafts that happen, like, later in the summer, like, his ADP fell, and, like, you could get him in, like, the second round of rookie drafts after that point, like, with the asthma struggles or whatever in camp. It's probably even lower now.
Yeah.
Like, dude, invest in Treylon Burks. I am 100% down with that, even though Malik Willis makes Kenny Pickett look like, I don't know, Peyton Manning, but, other than that, like, not bad.
All right. Well, that is all I've got. I think that is the show. I know this week you had a hard out. I had a hard in. Luckily, nobody had a hard on because, we're on camera now. But
Ayo!
There we go.
Well, actually, that definitely warrants. It's too good not to. Definitely had to include those air horns there. Thank you for tuning into another edition of the Lateral Show, a sideways look at fantasy football and the best fantasy podcast without check marks in the world. My name is Herms. You can follow me on Twitter at HermsNFL. Find some of my written work here. Find some of my other stuff other places. If you want to listen to that was stapler?
Wedding ring.
Oh, no, there you go. Very off on that guess. Anyway.
Good old ADD, like fidgeting with the wedding ring. Just dropped it right onto the mechanical keyboard.
Nice. It happens to the best of us. But yeah, if you want to listen to a really good show about college football, I produced the Football Guys College Football Show. You can go ahead and listen to that. Devi, all that stuff too. And then associate NFL editor over at clutchpoints.com. If you want to read some of my musings about the league, including more scathing things that I maybe end up saying about Chris Ballard in the future, you can find it on that website. So that's what I got. And I know you got all sorts of fun stuff that you have to let the people know. Yes,
yeets and greets, people, seasons, yeetings, tis the yeezin of the seat. No, tis the season of the yeet. With everyone's Twitter accounts getting yeeted into the wilderness. But you can find me at the following. You can find me at McLateral Theft for all my fantasy football stuff. You can find me at Mac McMillan ATL for all my other stuff. You can find me at Not McLateral FF for maybe some other things. And you can find me at Real Donald Musk for my parody tweets, where I impersonate a hybrid love child of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. It's a good time. That's really about all I got. The one other thing I'll say is, so apparently there's a platform called Mastodon, which is kind of like this Twitter alternative that's building at Herms. You will know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
And so at my work, where we write about all this tech stuff over at Tom's Guide, you should go check it out. Just like you should go check out the Heat Check every week at Fantasy Six Pack. We were doing an explainer on Mastodon, and I was very disappointed to find out it was not an explainer about the Atlanta metal band Mastodon. I'm like, what is this tech app? I thought we were going to be talking about Blood and Thunder.
Mastodon slaps, man.
Mastodon does slap, and they are from Atlanta, and it is awesome. I was at Shaky Knees last year, and like Garbage, just like literally in the middle of like in between one of their songs, she was just like, "Oh shit, it's the dudes from Mastodon," and I'm just like, "Yeah, that's awesome."
Oh man, dude, hell yeah! Shout out Mastodon.
Shout out Mastodon.
Shout out the listeners and viewers of the Lateral Show, you six packers out there. And until next time, I don't know. I'm just amused about the Donald. People have told me it's beautiful Tesla, wonderful. Never seen a car this good, absolutely wonderful. That rocket ship, oh beautiful.